Blizzard just announced 25 cards being changed on Thursday with the new patch notes, with 18 being buffs and 7 being nerfs. They told us what cards are being changed, but they didn't tell us how, so I'm going to predict it right now. Wild Paw Null is going to probably become a 6-mana card. They could also reduce the health by 1 or 2, so it's a little less oppressive and powerful on the board, easier to remove, but I think they reduce or increase the mana cost. They could also get rid of the Maestra interaction, but that's probably too complicated for them and too complicated to casual players who don't keep up with the patch notes as much, because who knows, they play like a couple of games a week and they're like, why is this interaction not working? I don't understand. I think just nerfing the mana cost would accomplish the same goal of slowing Wild Paw Null down without completely changing how the card works fundamentally. Next, we have Sinstone Graveyard, which could be nerfed in possibly 2 different ways as well, nerfing this to become 4 mana. I thought that 3 mana would make this card a little more niche and less powerful. Very wrong about that. But I think at 4 mana, it would slow it down enough to where your opponent, assuming you're playing this, your opponent can build a board to contest a big stealth minion, or potentially draw or get enough mana to play a removal to deal with the big stealth minion. The other thing that could happen is making this a 0/0 instead of a 1/1, so that way overall these stats of this will be 1/1 less in total than what it would have been before. This will ultimately lower the damage by 1 to 4 depending on how many ghosts you summon, and make it a little bit easier for your opponent to remove it once it becomes unstealthed. I think that that's a little bit too weak of a nerf though, considering how strong Miracle Rogue is, so I would say probably nerfing the mana cost. Next, we have the final showdown for Demon Hunter, which is an interesting nerf because if you make it harder to complete the quest line, more cards are going to get reduced in cost. So this is a very interesting one. A direction I think they could go is changing the reward of this to maybe like draw an extra card or gain 3 attack this turn or something along those lines. I don't know, just spitballing here, but I think they could go with changing the reward of this, or making it draw 5 cards would slow down the overall completion of the quest line, which even though 1 more card is being reduced in cost, still would overall slow down the deck. So I think that those are the 2 directions that they would probably go with this Demon Hunter card. Next, we have Sinful Brand. Pretty easy, just nerf by 1 mana. You can't cut the damage in half because then it becomes a basically irrelevant card. I don't think you should nerf it by any more than 1 mana, unless this nerf ends up being very small in some way, in which case maybe you nerf it to 3 mana, but I don't know. I think that nerfing it by 1 mana and making it 2 would definitely be a fine place for this card to be. It slows down the overall combo potential of this card by a turn, and really the only problem with this is when you draw the nuts and you're able to kill people turn 5 with it. So I think nerfing it by 1 mana would be very, very nice. Next is Glacial Advance, which should be nerfed in 3 ways, all of which are fairly viable. 1, increase the mana cost, 2, decrease the damage, and 3, decrease the mana cheat. I don't think they increase the mana. I think that'd be too much of a nerf. I think would slow down the card a bit too much. The mana cheat, I think, would be the best nerf overall, but it takes away part of the flavor of being able to burst down your opponent and play multiple cards in 1 turn, which people who play Frost Death Knight enjoy. So I think the direction they will end up going is nerfing the damage of this card to 3, which, considering the fact that you're probably going to get an extra copy with Lady Death Whisper, and you're also going to be getting every copy of this card you can when you discover stuff, except for maybe Frostwyrm's Fury. If it's between those 2, maybe you take the Fury, but most of the time you're going to get 1 to 2 more copies of Glacial Advance. So a nerf of 1 damage would actually be a nerf of anywhere from 2 to like 4 or 5 damage, which is a lot, especially for a burst deck that can oftentimes pretty exactly kill you. So I think that nerfing the damage is what they'll most likely do. Shock Spitter, I don't want to see this card being nerfed by 1 mana. It's different from Sinstone Graveyard because you could play this turn 4 and then get value out of it turn 5. But with Shock Spitter, you can't play it turn 4 and then get more value out of it later because it's just a battle cry ability. So if you nerf the mana of this card, it just becomes basically unplayable. And I like the idea of having this cool Weapon Hunter with some burst potential. I just think it's a little bit too fast right now. So what they could do is change the battle cry, make it start at 0 damage. So when you end up activating it 3 or 4 times at the end of the game, the overall damage is a little bit less, which could be a big difference because I've been exactly killed by Shock Spitter so many times just because of how attacks line up coming into turn 7 or 8. They can pretty easily get almost exact damage, but you could also make it improved by every 2 hero attacks this game, which might nerf the card a bit too much. So it's got to be a nerf to the battle cry. Nerfing the stats would do absolutely nothing though, so it's got to be stats, maybe mana cost, and not stats, battle cry, and then maybe mana cost. And then last but not least is Astlar, which I don't know what the heck they're going to do with this card. It is ridiculously strong. I guess they can make the final form 10 mana, so it's more of a commitment when you actually want to play it. But if it's 10 mana, then you can't make the Mana Thirst 10 mana. That just doesn't make any sense. Also, nerfing it would mess up the flavor of the card because it's a 2 mana 2/2, 5 mana 5/5, and then an 8 mana 8/8. Like Prince Renathal, nerfing it to 40 cards for 35 health, it just doesn't look good. And I feel like some cards need to look good. I don't know why. I feel like that's what has to happen sometimes. So I really have no idea what they're going to do with Astlar. If it's a small nerf, it'll still be ridiculously strong. If it's a big nerf and they kill the card, a lot of people who crafted this and used it in a lot of their decks will be very upset. So it's a hard one. But now let's go to the buffs. Unholy Frenzy. This is probably just going to become 2 mana. I actually don't even think this card needs a buff. I think it's one of the best cards in Unholy. Basically, every time I get the option to discover it, I take it because it is really good removal. It generates multiple corpses, and especially if you combo it with like a Venomous Scorpid, it's basically just insta removal. So overall, I like this card. Probably decrease the mana by 1, so that way, I don't know, it's just a little bit easier to play, and it gives Unholy some extra removal. Next, we have the Battlefiend Necromancer. I'm going to talk about this card along with, where is it? Where's the other one? Along with, oh my gosh, I can't find it, but there's another Demon Hunter. Oh, wait, they're both right here, sorry. I think both of these are going to buff to become 2/2 Risen Footman, because I was like, how would they nerf a 2 mana 2/3 that summons a 1/2 every turn? Like, this is already kind of goated with the sauce. I think that it's probably going to become a 2/2 taunt minion, because you can't buff the stats of this card. I guess maybe you could make it a 1/4, so that way it's going to more reliably summon minions and it's harder to kill. But then that becomes extremely hard to kill, and this endless corpse, or this endless taunt generation might be a bit strong. So I really think they're just going to make it 2/2 Footman, so that way they can just buff both of these the exact same way with 1 buff. But I guess maybe they can make it a 2 mana 1/4, maybe. Next, we have Vengeful Walloper. This is useless. They could nerf this and make it 0 mana and outcast a Demon Hunter. Would not be good. They could make this a 10/10 0 mana card and outcast Demon Hunter. Would not be playable. But in all seriousness, they probably nerf it by, they probably buff it by 1 to 2 mana, probably make it 6 or 5. But I don't know, maybe they give it life steals so you have a little bit more survivability. I don't really know. I just think that this card, an Outcast Demon Hunter, was such a complete flop that no amount of buffs will actually save it. Next, we have Wither. Choose a minion. Each friendly undead steals an attack and health from it. I don't actually know what they do to this, because it's already an okay card a couple of the times when you played it. I don't think that this salvages or saves Undead Druid. Like, Aggro Druid and Ramp Druid will still be better even after this 1 buff, but they can maybe make it 1 mana, so that way it's easier to play in a fast deck, and its effect is good, but it's not like insane. I don't know. Nerfing or buffing it by 1 mana is probably the direction they go. I don't really know what else they could do. I mean, they can't steal 2 stats from it, because that would be really strong and it would kill almost any minion in the game. So that would be too big of a buff. I think it has to just be 1 mana. But again, much like this, I don't think it saves Undead Druid. I think Aggro Druid is still just better. Next, we have Vast Wisdom. This is probably going to a 2 mana card. Discover 2 spells that cost 3 or less, swap their costs. Yeah, probably going down to 2 mana, because it's basically, you have Arcane Intellect, which is draw 2, which is thinning your deck. So basically saying this is 3 mana generate 2 that are random, that might not necessarily be that great for you, is a little bit worse. So making it 2 mana makes the most sense to me. But at 2 mana, I'm wondering, does it become like ridiculously strong? Because imagine you play this for 2 mana and then you play like this build a snowman for 0, and next thing you know, you have a 0 mana 3/3 snowman out there. That's pretty decent value. But I mean, considering what Rogue can do, I guess it's not actually that strong. So making it 2 mana is probably what they do. Next, you have an Energy Shaper. 4 mana 3/5, transform all of your spells in your hand into ones that cost 2 more, but they keep their original cost. I think they could make it transform into ones that cost 3 more, or just buff the stats of this card to a 4 mana 4/5, so it's a little bit more of a threat on board when you initially play it. I think that they'll probably make it +1 attack. I think changing how the card works fundamentally would be a little bit harder to code and for Blizzard to do. So I think making it a 4 mana 4/5 or like a 3 mana 3/4 would probably be the direction they go with this. Actually, maybe a 3 mana 3/4 would just feel better to play, especially if they make this 2 mana, making this a 2/3 curve instead of a 3/4 curve might just be better in Blizzard's eyes. So yeah, I think nerfing this to 2 mana, nerfing this to 3 mana is best. Next we have Time Warden. Honestly, I think this card is already probably Dragon Paladin's best card. I don't know why this card's being buffed. I could probably think of a couple of other Paladin cards that should probably be buffed, but what do I think they're going to do here? Maybe they give it Taunt and Divine Shield as well, although that might be a little bit too strong because Divine Shield alone is like 1 mana's worth of stats. So yeah, I have no idea. Maybe a 4 mana 4/5 or again a 3 mana 3/4, very similar to the Energy Shaper. I could see them going a similar direction, or maybe they go one direction with this and make it 3 mana, and then they go another direction with this, making it a 4 mana 4/5, because making it 3 mana doesn't make sense. A lot of your stronger dragons come around turn 5. You've got the 3/6 that summons the whelps. You've got the 5 mana one that heals you 8, and those are really when your dragons start getting good. So I think keeping this at 4 mana to curve into that feels better to me. So I think it's going to become a 4 mana 4/5. Maybe it'll get like Taunt or Divine Shield or something. Next we have the Haunting Nightmare, 3 mana Death Rattle. Haunt a card in your hand when you play it, summon a 3/3 soldier, and it's a 3/3. I think that this card gets buffed in a way that like maybe gives it Taunt, so its Death Rattle goes off and it protects you a little bit. So that way you're able to more consistently get the soldier. Maybe it'll haunt a card that you can play in your hand, because several times it's haunted like expensive cards in my hand that I can't play for a long time. So maybe it'll choose the cards a little bit better, and it's like a behind the scenes buff. I don't exactly know. I don't even think this card's very good. Again, I think it's similar to like Wither and the Vengeful Walloper. Just like, why? I think it's already an okay card, and I don't know if a buff will really save it, but probably they couldn't make it like a 3 mana 3/4 or a 4/3, because since you want it to die, giving it a little bit more attack to be a little bit more aggressive could be nice in a shadow aggro priest deck. So yeah, maybe making it 4 attack or giving it Taunt or something would be the way they go. Next is Bonecaller, a 4 mana 2/4. This card's already good. I don't even like the fact that they're buffing this card in the first place. It's already good in some like aggressive undead style of priest, but it's also good in the control Plague Spreader priest that has seen a decent amount of play. So I mean, I guess maybe they make it a 4 mana 3/4, so it's a little bit harder to kill, or maybe a 4 mana 2/5 or 2/6, so it can protect you a little bit more, because I do admit a 2/4 in terms of its stat line is a little bit weak. It's very easy to kill and just run down your opponent if they're a priest. So I guess making it have a little bit more HP would make sense. Maybe they make it like a 4 mana 1/6, so it doesn't really have any aggressiveness at all. It's just a wall that summons something cool. I think that could be decent. So yeah, probably buffing the health would be the direction to go with this, because I don't really see what else they could buff. Next, we have High Cultist Basilisk, which is a Battlecry, resurrect all friendly undeads that died after your last turn. I like this card already. I've seen it played once or twice in some cool instances, but I think making it a 4 mana 3/5, kind of similar to these cards, how they're already a 4 mana 3/5. I think making this a 4 mana 3/5 would be nice. It would just increase the ability of you to play it. You can probably fit the mana around it. Let's just say you want to be aggressive. This dies turn 3. You could play this turn 4, maybe. I don't exactly know. But overall, the effect is already really good. Like, I don't think a mana change will actually affect this card that much. I don't think maybe making it a 5 mana 5/5. But again, you're not playing it for the stats or even the mana. You're playing it for its effect. So I'm not 100% sure exactly how they would change this card, but again, probably making it 1 less mana or slightly better stats. Next, we have the Infantry Reanimator, along with the Darkon Drathier. Sorry if I mispronounced the name. I don't think undead or like a reborn style of Warlock is just gonna work. Trust me, I tried to play the deck and I went 0 and 11. Not a single game was even close. So unless they make this like a 4 mana 4/4 and then this a 6 mana 6/6 and like massively buff these cards, I don't think that it's actually going to change undead Warlock or discard Warlock at all in any way, because discard Warlock is the other style of Warlock that was brought about with this patch. I don't think that this really changes either of them at all. So next we have Asvedon, a 3-mana 3/3 battlecry. Copy the last spell your opponent played. I think a cool buff to this would be add a copy of the last card your opponent played to your hand. It costs 0, so at least it's not like a random cast. But you could also buff the stats, maybe make it a 3/4. But again, you're playing it for the ability, not the stats. It's a very similar situation to the High Cultist. Like, I guess since this is 3 mana and you are playing it a little bit more tempo-wise, sometimes more tempo-wise, could warrant a stat bonus being important. But I really think that changing the battle cry a little bit would be the best way to do it, because for a legendary, this is just, it's pretty weak. If you talk about what's her name, Vanessa Van Cleef, it adds the card to your hand so you can play it in whatever way you want. I think making this similar, because it's limited to specifically just a spell but giving it a bonus, maybe instead of making it cost 0, because I don't like cards costing 0, say add a copy of the card to your hand, blah, 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 it costs 1, so that way it still costs mana to play things. Because again, I hate free cards. I think that free cards in Hearthstone are ridiculous. I think that that would be a cool buff, because you can choose what you do with the spell and when to play it exactly. And then next we have Disruptive Spellbreaker. Either make it a 5 mana 4/6, so it's harder to kill, or a 4 mana 4/5 with this ability. I was already playing this card in Control Warrior, and Control Warrior didn't feel even that bad to me. This card disrupted rogues. I've gotten rid of some Shadow Steps they were saving before. And really just any deck, it's pretty good against. Most decks run spells. Demon Hunter, they usually keep their Bound Soul in their hand because they don't want like Mutanus to eat their minion, or Patchwork, so they keep the Bound Soul in their hand until they win a combo. Disruptive Spellbreaker can beat Demon Hunter with it. And so I think the ability and the card actually is really strong. So changing this to like a 4-mana card to play a little bit sooner would, quite honestly, maybe make this card broken. Do I think it would be strong enough to make Warrior good? No, because Warrior still has a lot of other problems, but I think that this individual card could carry Warrior in some matchups. Next, you have Last Stand. Draw a taunt minion, double stats. I mean, this has to be reduced by like 1, maybe even 2 mana for it to even be playable. The fact that you're spending 4 mana to draw a singular card is unplayable. I mean, even 3 mana to draw 1 card. I don't care if you're doubling the stats. I don't care if you're tripling the gosh darn stats. 3 mana to draw 1 card in today's meta, with how fast things are and how good single target removal can be, 3 mana to draw 1 card would be insanely bad. I think it has to be 2 mana, or like 4 mana draw 2 taunt minions, or maybe like 3 mana draw 2 minions. But I think 3 mana draw 2 would be bad. So it's either 2 mana draw 1 doublet stats, or 4 mana draw 2 doublet stats. If it's anything related to 3 mana, it's either going to be broken or terrible. Next we have Remornia. Actually very excited about this card. I don't exactly know what they're going to do to change it, but this was one of the cards I was extremely excited about when it was announced. I would love to see it have more attack or be less mana, so there could be some cool, maybe OTKs or big burst damage things that, thank you for the sub, that somebody could do with this deck. Like, there could be a deck built around an OTK or a cool combo. And then last but not least, we have Nelly. I honestly just think they revert the Nelly nerf. Literally, as soon as they nerfed Nelly, Warrior became unplayable. Like, that patch is what sparked Warrior becoming unplayable, except for like in Rage Warrior for a brief period of time. And even in Rage Warrior now is not actually that bad. I recommend giving it a try. But any sort of control or mid-range Warrior, as soon as this card was nerfed, same with like Quest Pirate Warrior, as soon as this card was nerfed, it fell off the face of the gosh darn earth. They also nerfed like 1 or 2 other pirates during that time, which hurt Quest Warrior a lot. But yeah, this is, I would say they probably just revert the nerf and they make Nelly's ship quite possibly just give you 1 cost pirates again, instead of reducing the cost of the pirates you discovered by 1, because as soon as that happened again, it was just unplayable. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. I tried to keep this under 20 minutes. I cut it pretty close. If you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, or thoughts on what you think is going to be nerfed, let me know, and I'll see you in the next one.